8th October is Indian Air Force Day. We are uploading this interview with the retired Wing Commander Pradeep Deshpande just a little prior to that day. The initial part of the interview might appear that I'm not asking any questions at all. I was, in fact, visualizing the narrative and got mesmerized by the work that the Air Force does for us to protect us. Let's go ahead and listen to the podcast. Hi, welcome to yet another episode of A Story for Your Query. We have with us a retired Wing Commander, Pradeep Deshpande. Thank you, Wing Commander, for having taken time off from your busy schedule to spend some time with us on this podcast. Having worked with the IAF for 22 years, you took a voluntary retirement and joined the national carrier. And when you were working with the IAF, you were trained with the Israeli team, and you also had a chance to spend some time with the Royal Air Force, UK. And you were also part of the Kargil operations. We have heard a lot about the Army and the Kargil. Maybe you could give us an overview of what the Air Force does in a war, how it helps us out. You could do.
Yeah. So, Dr. Pravila, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to this podcast. I'm honored. It's a privilege to be here. So, to go to your question, yes, I served in the Air Force for 22 years, 22 fantastic years in the Air Force, and had the opportunity to mix with some of the international air forces, such as the Royal Air Force and the Israeli Air Force. And also during the Royal Air Force tenure, there were 18 other nationalities which were there. And so the Air Force officers from those nationalities were also around. And a major part of the RAF Staff College, which was equivalent of doing post-graduation in defense studies, a major part of it was interaction with the NATO forces, both in Europe as well as in America. So visit to the NATO headquarters, visit to the Pentagon, visit to Washington D.C., etc. were very, very excellent experiences. Really opened up the horizons for me. So coming to the Kargil operations, I would not say fortunate. I would just say I was honored to be the part of the Indian Air Force contingent that participated in the Kargil operations. What happened was, if I tell you what happened, it will give you an overview about what the Air Force did, because practically that is what it was. So around the 17th of May, we were told to fly 5 aircraft from Airport, which is in Punjab, to a place called Avantipur, which is just close to Srinagar in the Srinagar Valley. So the Avantipur is another base over there. And we were told to move there and mount what is called an ORP, which is Operational Readiness Platform, which means that the aircraft are ready at very short notice to take off in 3 minutes to get airborne or fully armed to do whatever mission that is assigned at that point in time. We were taken to Srinagar, where we were briefed by the Army. And the Army had now requisitioned the Air Force to help them out in this operation. Army tried a lot to do a few things on its own, but then it could not, and that is when they brought in the Air Force. And that is basically how the one part of the Air Force functions, which is called close air support. That means you give support to the Army from the air. You soften the targets either by bombing them or firing missiles or rockets at those areas, or just keep them pinned, the enemy pinned, while the foot soldiers move in and take over those positions. So now this particular place is like a knife edge. The middle Himalayas, the Pir Panjal is on this side, and the Kargil range is on the eastern side. They are like knife edge. I mean, the width of that the peak would be about in the region of 15 or 20 feet, which meant, and it's a sharp precipice. So it was very difficult for the Army to approach that when the people were already sitting on top. And it was very difficult for the Air Force to use conventional weapons to be able to target that, because can you imagine from about 15-20,000 trying to put a bomb in a room which is 14 or 15 feet wide. So it was a very it's a difficult situation. So the Air Force tried the conventional method of taking using conventional bombs and rockets, but a miss by 15 or 20 feet would mean the bomb would actually fall in the valley and not on the target.
Mm-hmm.
So while this process was going on, my squadron and me and my pilots, we were giving what is called an air defense cover. That means even when the Air Force aircraft are attacking targets on the ground, they are vulnerable to enemy aircraft coming and spoiling the show.
Yes.
So the enemy aircraft would want to come in that area and prevent our aircraft which are attacking the targets on the ground. So we were giving a cover on top, which is called air defense cover. That means we were sanitizing the airspace with our what we call air superiority fighters. We had MiG-29s at that point in time. Also, subsequently, Mirage 2000 were brought in. So these were aircraft that were superior to the envisaged threat from the Pakistani Air Force. So we ensured that area was sanitized by patrolling that area during when these our own ground attack aircraft are going and attacking the targets. So that was the major role of the Air Force during that operations, which was tied up with the Army. So when the Army was, so we did the softening up of the targets, and then the Army climbed the slopes to be able to take over those what is called sangars. Sangars are like bunkers, bunkers in the snow. So the sangars were where the Pakistani forces were occupied, were then attacked, like we have seen that movie Sher Shah, and some other movies where they show how the bunkers are attacked, how they were located at such critical positions and difficult to climb up. So the other role that the Air Force had during this was reconnaissance. So they had to photograph the area to be able to then, so we had aircraft which would photograph the area, then come back, you remove the films, analyze the films. You could see those yak tracks, and you could see black spots, which were actually the soldiers. You could see the gun positions of the enemy, and then you would take those coordinates, and then you would bring them back. And later on in the war, we had what is called precision guided munitions, PGMs. These are like laser guided bombs. Other bombs, which are now we call them dumb bombs, and these are smart bombs. So these smart bombs, you can actually designate. Once you have the latitudes and longitudes of the position, then you can designate what a laser designation pod, which will actually designate that exact spot. And you launch the bomb, and the bomb will ride the laser beam and go. We saw a little bit of those videos we saw during the Iraq war. Pakistan, the US Air Force using those, where with minimum, they used it mostly to avoid collateral damage. In our case, we use them to pinpoint or to hit the targets with pinpoint accuracy. They had the Stinger missiles, which we didn't know, which are shoulder-fired missiles. Infrared, which means they seek a source of heat. So once you fire a missile in a general direction, there is the infrared missile seeks that source of heat and goes and explodes in the proximity of the heat source. So even a heat source like an aircraft engine, the exhaust of the aircraft engine is what it seeks and goes and targets. So they had the shoulder-fired missiles because they were sitting on hilltops. When we went closer to them, in fact, in my own formation, we had an aircraft which had gone for photo reconnaissance, and we were giving him air defense cover. In order to get better images, he came down and he came within the range of the Stinger missile, and he was hit. But fortunately for him, he had two engines, and only one of the engines was hit. And then we told him, we immediately called him that we can see some smoke from the right engine. So he descended, and he landed back in Srinagar safe and sound. But that is the time we realized that we are in for the long haul, because that was the first day of our mission. So we knew that it was not fun and games anymore. It was serious business. And sadly, the next day during one of the attack missions, one other aircraft was hit. The pilot ejected, but was captured. Nachiketa, if you all remember that name during Kargil operations, he was a prisoner of war at that time for a while, because he was then arrested. Because, like I had mentioned in my earlier talk, that the terrain is so inhospitable, and little bit of wind and you're in the enemy territory. Even if you're coming in down in a parachute after from a sick aircraft, you get blown towards the thing, and then that's it. You fall this side of the valley, you are in the enemy area, and this side of the valley, you are in your own zone.
One zone.
So, and then the third day, we had a helicopter which was hit by a missile, and we lost a few pilots and some crew there. So that was the tough part of the operation. Then we took a stock of it, and that's when the Mirage 2000s came in, and the precision guided munitions were used, and that turned the tide. We got the intelligence people to do more photography reconnaissance missions to get accurate assessment of the lay of the land, and then then the whole thing happened, and then of course the army did the final, as they say, the victory is always measured by foot. So the foot soldiers had to be there, and they did a tremendous job, and captured all the points, and yeah, that was
I can
Kargil.
imagine, because when you're going uphill from the top, you will get a better, you will be able to target them better.
Yes, and they had chosen such positions that from there they could actually attack our highways, the highways that were going to Kargil, which were bringing in supplies, our gun positions which were there in the valley, because from there they could see those things. They were there. They were all exposed, so they could see, and from there they could direct their own fire from their side to the exact locations.
Now I understand, after listening to you, there was a time when you said courage is managing fear, and we have to take the last man along. Now it makes sense.
Yes.
Now it makes absolute sense. What you said at that time, I didn't realize. Now I do. Anyway, taking you back to your beginnings as getting into the Khadakwasla school. You come from an IAF family? Did somebody coerce you into joining, or did you join of your own volition?
Quite the reverse, actually. I come from an Air Force family. Absolutely, my father was an engineer in the Air Force, and when I say reverse, not really reverse in that sense, but because he did not discourage, he encouraged us to understand the life of the Air Force. He gave us everything that the Air Force could provide for the family. And then you would see those pilots in their overalls, the flying suits, and walking smartly to the aircraft and taking off. And of course, my father was always in a uniform, and I was always fascinated, because as a kid, I remember I would always wear his cap and run around the house, or wear his medals on my T-shirt, and pretend that I was already an Air Force officer. So he did not discourage any of that. I used to see these MiG-21s flying over there, work up towards the war, flying in the night. I used to call them chariots. Now I remember. I mean, I imagine them to be like chariots of fire. They were, and I always thought that if there's anything one has to do in this world, it has to be this. And it was such a wonderful combination. You had a uniform to wear. You were in a military environment, and you were flying machines that were, wasn't available for anyone to do, and such thrilling stuff. So it was too good a combination to let go. So I pressed on with that, and my father did not encourage me at that point in time, only because he felt that engineering branch in the Air Force is next to the flying branch, because flying branch is the cutting edge, and the promotions are that much little slower. The glamour is more in flying. So my father was worried that somewhere down the line, this guy might, get off the boat, and then he has got to start all over again. He'll be too disappointed. So, but after I had passed my India entrance examination, and then I went to him, and then he said, "Okay, now this guy has done so much. Now let me guide him." And
so serious. So
Yeah.
he's serious in his decision.
He's serious in his decision. And then he said, okay, because he wanted me to be an engineer and wanted me to be in the civil street, because he felt that the opportunities were more, in the civil, where you could actually do what he could not do. My father came from a very modest background. He worked very, very hard to be where he was. He wanted me to take over from where he had left somewhat.
It is typical Indian parent thinking.
Yes.
That
So
I should give my child something more than what I got.
yes, yes, but later on, he was all there, and my mother also. Despite the fact that I'm not the only child, but I was the only son, and I am the only son, and she has this. She's a very emotional person even today, but she was. She felt that if this guy wanted to do it, I have to support. She cried every day, but she let me do it. So yeah, so that's how
that's what makes India incredible, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that's how I landed up in the Air Force. The short answer is a little bit initial, not discouragement, but initial, not a disapproval. But later on, when they realized that I'm very, very serious, they were
Initial
all
skepticism, maybe.
skepticism, maybe. Yes.
Yeah. And then acceptance that this fellow is very serious.
And then encouragement.
Yes. Now, you moved on to join Air India. Did you find any difference between, you would, I'm sure, coming from IAF to Air India? I'm sure there would be a sea change that you would have experienced. But what were the highlights of your career at Air India?
Okay, so changing over from the Air Force to Air India, as you say rightly, it's a sea change, but it is another dimension of flying. And if you're a flyer, which is what you would always look for another dimension of flying. It is not only about I like to fly a fighter plane. When if you're a flyer, I like to fly. Period. Now, whether it's a glider or it's a fast jet or whether it's an airliner, you enjoy that every part of it. And there are so many dimensions to it. There is so many, it seems very monotonous flying an airliner, do a Bombay, London, you take off from Bombay at 8 in the morning. And after that, you put the autopilot on at 400 feet. And after that, for the next 8.5 hours, you're only looking at the skies and doing a little bit of RT, radios, the transmissions here and there. And then the next job you have to do is only about 20 minutes before you land into London. So the intervening 7.5, 8 hours is virtually staring at screens and doing some radios, and if you want, look at the sky and admire it. And if you do this day in and day out, it can be monotonous. But if you bring in a variety to it, you look at the geography of the area, you look at the Caspian Sea, and you look at Turkey, and you think about those things, or you just talk about those things with your colleagues, and also the other procedures that are involved. The airspace is getting crowded. There are new procedures that come in. So if you keep your interests alive through that, then even civil flying can be really interesting. Negotiating weather, fuel planning, making the flight more and more efficient, making it more and more comfortable for the passengers, interacting with the crew, the engineers. It's great fun. I enjoyed it entirely, completely enjoyed civil flying as well. It took us a little bit of time to get to become a captain, because so that was the, I would not say downside, but perhaps that was the only thing that I can think not so good about joining civil aviation, is particularly Air India at that point, because you join at the bottom of the rung, and all despite your experience, you feel that you've got so many 1,000 hours of flying, and there are these other boys who are just about 500-600 hours, and they are going ahead of you because they joined the company earlier than you. But once you resolve that in your head, once you reconcile to it, and you realize this is the system, this is how it is. It has not been done only for you. You walked into it with your eyes open. So the minute you resolve and reconcile with that, after that, it's great fun. And Air India has done a lot for me, for my family. I think, as I tell a lot of people, if the Air Indians swear by Air India. What I mentioned to you earlier about GRD, he was instrumental in building this culture in Air India.
I've heard a lot of stories about him that we could probably do another day. I want the listeners to listen to your personal side of the story. I believe you are a middle distance runner and you spend a lot of time with the underprivileged children. And you also take a keen interest in vocal music.
Yes.
So how do you keep this regimen? And
Well,
I would want you to sing a couple of lines.
So, as they say, busy man has a lot of time. It's the lazy who don't.
I agree with you totally. Totally.
And I think it is all about interest. I think if you like to do something, and if you like to do, I would say just do something. Just like to contribute, like to do, you never feel tired. I mean, it's that. So I've been I can't sit idle. I'm not a fidgety person, but I cannot sit just blankly staring at the wall, or just watching the I hardly watch television. We did not have cable TV in our house for many years. Now, because of internet, it's become easy. So you choose and watch the programs that you want to at the time that you want to. Otherwise, we didn't have cable TV. I have not watched news for the last maybe 10 years. And I have not, we don't subscribe to a newspaper at home. Never.
Really?
Yeah, we don't, because I feel that what is important for me to know, somebody will tell me any which ways. and after that, I pick up magazines. I do look at articles which interest me, whether it was related to politics or whether. So it's more like picking and choosing what I would like to read and learn about. So I think that gave me a lot of time to do a lot of things. So middle distance running used to happen quite early in the morning. So that would be out of the way by 8:30 in the morning. After that, even what I would do was, even when I went on flights, if I landed up at a time, I would just decide how much time before I had woken up, and I would go to bed. I would go to bed in London at 6 in the evening, London time. Because I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning, or whatever 8 hours of sleep that I had, or 7-8 hours. I should go for a run to the Hyde Park at 3:34 in the morning. Outside, Hyde Park would be locked, but I would still run outside, come back in time for my breakfast, feel fresh, because you feel so energized. You don't feel exhausted when you're doing something that you like to do. And as far as less privileged children are concerned, I think they are hugely talented. Very good. I used to see these small children coming to the class. One day I saw this girl neatly dressed and writing her homework, something, and then she was cringing, the pain. So I asked her, I said, "Kya hua? Why are you painful?" She said, "Nahi, kuch nahi, sir." I said, "Kya hua?" She was hungry. She hadn't eaten.
Oh my God.
And I felt so sorry for them. But school aana hai, time pe aana hai, wear a nice dress, comb her hair, wash her face, everything was all in place. But where was the food going to come from? But the other example that I want to give out, less privileged, is I helped some of these youth set up some, they were at an editing studio for some videos, and they had a small vegetable shop. So I had offered, they didn't ask, I offered them some money as loan. I didn't say it's not a grant. I said, "Loan, you guys will pay me back as in when the things come." So they happily took that money. I also have a small commercial property which I have let out. I'm drawing parallels here. This commercial property is owned by a person who's baking stuff. Affluent family, doing it as a side business. During COVID, this person who was in my rented accommodation, the commercial accommodation, came to me asking for a waiver of the rent. Right? These boys did not miss their EMI even once.
This is amazing.
And they never even told me. They were struggling now. Their whole video thing was shut because of COVID. But they did not even come and ask me, "Sir, can we postpone this installment?" Nothing. Every single month on the dot. That is their commitment. That is their sincerity. So I think they're privileged in many ways. It's just that I think there's just that we need that redistribution of wealth. We redistribute it, and they'll our country will do wonders.
I can see that. I can see that. So this brings us to the end of the podcast. But before I say bye to everybody, we would like to hear a line or two from you singing.
Okay, so I'll sing one of my old favorites from the movie Anand, and since it is the sunset time, I'll
Sure.
just sing those two lines from that song. कहीं दूर जब दिन ढल जाए, सांझ की दुल्हन बदन चुराए, चुपके से आए मेरे ख्यालों के आंगन में, कोई सपनों के दीप जलाए, दीप जलाए, कहीं दूर जब दिन ढल जाए, सांझ की दुल्हन बदन चुराए, चुपके से आए.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really, really an enjoyable interview.
Thank you. I enjoyed it myself.
There is so much that we have learned. Civilians need to know so much more about what you do to keep us safe so that we can sleep peacefully in our beds.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.